One of the most frequent questions that I receive from patients and also colleagues is related to leaky gut. Does really leaky gut exist, or leaky gut syndrome? Well, the syndrome, for what is being described, I don't think that exists. There is no such a clinical entity that can be defined or encapsulated in a syndrome. But the fact that the intestine can leak, I believe that this now is supported by so many scientific and clinical evidence that I don't think that this should be an object of discussion. In the past, we thought that this barrier that separates us from the environment was static and will have as a single goal to keep at bay a possible enemy that harm us. Now we understand that this is a very dynamic barrier, the largest being the intestinal barrier, that really participate in an active way in scooping the environment that surrounds us and decided, how we can interact with our surrounding environment. There is another aspect of the intestinal permeability or leaky gut that is really taking center stage. The past proposition that to develop any kind of problem, two elements were necessary and sufficient, namely genetic predisposition and exposed environmental trigger, seems not to hold true anymore. In order for these two elements to interact and therefore to develop problems, they need to physically touch each other, and this is prevented by this barrier if they are functional and physiologically appropriate. When this barrier becomes dysfunctional, i.e. leaky gut in this case, then there is an easy passage of this instigator in our body that can eventually trigger, on a specific genetic background, a process of inflammation that leads to a disease. There is also another aspect that I find extremely intriguing and object of great level of interest right now, that these three elements, i.e. the genetic predisposition, the exposure to environmental triggers, and increased permeability, are part of a much more complex syndicate of factors that will decide if we stay healthy or not. A fourth element is an immune system that is hyperbelligerent, and a fifth element seems to be the composition and function of the ecosystem in our gut, the microbiome, that can eventually decide if and when we switch from genetic predisposition to clinical outcome. Also intriguing is the fact that three of these factors, namely gut permeability, immune belligerence, and microbiome composition and function, they can highly influence each other. And therefore, I really do believe that understanding more the physiological and pathological consequences to have a functional barrier or a dysfunctional barrier will open new paradigms of knowledge of science, knowledge of the pathogenesis of these diseases, and new target for possible interventions.